Well, and welcome to the program. It's a real privilege and pleasure to welcome Father Robert Spitzer, wonderful Jesuit priest, and someone that I've known for, I don't know, probably 20 years, Father.
Yeah,
It's great to
yeah.
have you on.
Good to be on again, Dr. Curran.
Yeah, this is great. So, Father, I was chatting with you a little bit beforehand and saying the last time we were together was a couple of years ago at the Healing the Culture Gala in downtown Spokane,
Yeah.
and that's one of the impetuses for having you on here and now. But I was kind of teasing you because I asked some kind of tricky questions to
Oh,
you in
yeah.
front of the group.
No, it was great, though. It was great.
Well, it actually inspired me. So I have a son who loves to ask questions. So,
Yeah,
Father, I've got 10 interesting questions to ask you in the course of our interview. So
very
get
good.
ready. And folks, people don't know what the Father does not know what these questions are. So, Father, get ready. You don't
All
seem that
right.
nervous, Father. You don't seem
No,
that nervous.
not so much. I've heard a lot of questions before, but maybe these will be unique.
Nice, nice. Okay, well, let's start off with the first one. So, I mentioned actually at that gala, and I'll mention to you live on the air that I have lots of guests on my program. And let me say it this way: I'm rarely, if ever, intimidated by the guest, feeling like, oh goodness, this guest is going to really keep me on my toes or stretch me and make me be attentive to every single word that I say. And I said that you're number one on my list
Oh,
of
dear.
the most intimidating guests that and it's not that you're not friendly, Father, it's that you're so smart,
Oh,
you're so
no.
erudite that every word you're like, yeah, I wouldn't have used that word. So, Father, here's my question:
Okay.
who is, when you think about the different dialogues, debates, interviews, encounters that you've had in your long and illustrious career of doing public teaching, conversations, etc., who would you say is the most challenging interview or challenging debate dialogue you've ever had?
Well, there have been a few. There was on the Larry King show, I did have a animated discussion with Stephen Hawking and Leonard Mladenov and Deepak Chopra about the universe and the existence of God. And that was a good one. It was animated. It wasn't overly challenging, but it did have a lot of, a good technical dimensions, and at the same time, a lot of good opportunity for the theistic point of view to be represented well and intellectually. I had a very interesting debate with a fellow by the name of Dr. Bybeck on the Today Show. It was a debate, and this is way back, with the Seattle initiative for euthanasia, active euthanasia, but physician-assisted suicide is what we call it now. And so that was a really good animated discussion. Definitely had some good discussions on the History Channel, and a lot of good discussions as well on Closer to the Light, an NPR program. All very good interviews with very good people. I think at the end of the day, though, theism or the pro-life position, I hope, was represented well by me. But as I say, I'm not the best judge of my performance.
Well, Father, I can say every time I've ever seen you, you do an amazing job of speaking the truth with clarity and charity. And Father, as you know, is the founder and in charge of the Magis Center for Faith and Reason. And we'll talk more about the important work that the Magis Center is doing, Father. Just one of the things that when you think about a debate and engaging an interlocutor, I think of the spirit of the Summa and St.
Yeah.
Thomas Aquinas, who would raise
Mhm.
the questions in the most challenging form, rather than the
Yep.
sort of snarky gotcha type of forms of
Yeah.
questions.
Yeah.
Who would you say does a good job of asking the challenging question in the most profound way, in the most challenging way, in a way that St. Thomas Aquinas would appreciate?
Oh, gee. That's hard to say. I think a lot of people Yeah, there are some good snarky ones out there, but you know, I, you know, I think that,
Well,
oh
for instance,
gosh,
let me ask it to you
yeah,
this way, Father. So let's get
yeah,
away from the person and let's get to the argument. So when people say, "Oh, there's no evidence for the existence of God in the visible world around us," or when
yeah.
they say that the universe doesn't have this orientation towards a sense that it was created for the sake of the Earth being as it is, where it is, etc. Um,
Mhm.
is there a particular form of people raising those questions that show that they're sincere and that they're profoundly pondering the question? Even and we have answers for it, but what would be an example of someone who is asking that question in a very like sincere and profound way, looking at the evidence that they see around them?
Well, I think, most of the time, those very sincere people are kind of caught in the current age, right? There's a lot of information out there about fine-tuning coincidences, right? That the universe is profoundly fine-tuned for life, and suggestive of an intelligence that has certainly manifested the or at least let's say tipped the scales in the direction of life when the probabilities purely and simply would be definitely not in favor of life as a natural or pure chance occurrence. And so there's a lot of arguments there, but a lot of people are very worried about the multiverse. And I think that, that argument, sincere people up until about 2018 really believed that an infinite multiverse might be a possibility, and that would explain all the, does with an infinite number of possible universes in an infinite, eternal amount of time, why anything could happen, even something that's 10 raised to the 10 raised to the 123 to 1 against. Eventually, some universe somewhere could do that amidst an infinite number of universes. And I think there were people who really believed in this fractally expanding infinite universe. But then in 2018, old Stephen Hawking came along with Thomas Hertog, and in his last scientific paper in the Journal of High Energy Physics, Hawking basically denied the possibility that our universe could have arisen out of a fractal multiverse. In fact, he said, if there is a multiverse, the multiverse that could generate us would have to be a multiverse with very few bubble universes, most of which would be like ours. And such a multiverse would have to have a limit to inflation in the past. So it would have to have a beginning. Well, once Hawking and Hertog said that and joined forces with people like Thomas Banks and others, the infinite multiverse, uh, well, it almost has become a thing of the past. And now, if you do have a multiverse, and let's suppose it fits the explanatory requirements of Hawking and Hertog, well, then those bubble universes would be like ours, and there'd be very few of them, and there'd be a beginning. Well, now these 10 to the 10 to the 123 to 1, which is the odds of our low entropy occurring in our universe by pure chance, that's like the same odds as a monkey typing the entire corpus of Shakespeare by random tapping of the keys in a single try. I mean, that's the odds of that happening are, of course, very improbable, exceedingly improbable. And so, how are you going to do that with a limited number of bubble universes? The answer is, very few bubble universes. You're not. I mean, the fine tuning question is now right back in people's faces. And that, there's a reason why, the number of scientists overall, according to the last Pew survey of the American Association for the Advancement of Science, the last Pew survey said that 51% of scientists overall are theists, That is to say, they believe in God or in some kind of a higher supernatural power. Okay, so that's 51%. But if you look at the young scientists, the 40 and under statistic, that is 66% of young scientists are believers in God, with only about 15% or so being agnostics and 15% being atheists. That puts the light decidedly in favor of theism over atheism, certainly. And if you combine agnostics with atheists, it's a super majority, and so of young scientists. So there's obviously a reason for the shift. In the time of Francis Collins, of course, who's the head of the Genome Project, he right now, but he's very much a believer in God. He said, "Oh, this is in his book, the handwriting of God or the language of God." He was talking about the DNA. In that book, he did a little poll, and I think it was 46% of scientists were theists at that time. Today, that's gone up another 5% to 51%, and only 41% of scientists overall are agnostics or atheists. So it's pretty clear, that the trend is moving in the direction, at least in the scientific community, it's moving in the direction of theism. And this is a good Pew survey of the American Association for the Advancement of Science. So that's a very large, well-represented organization. So the trends are shifting, and the reason is not just people like Stephen Hawking undermining the multiverse, the infinite multiverse, but also a lot of younger scientists just coming, like Luke Barnes, who published, Fortunate Universe, etc. They're just making themselves and their opinions, they're just putting it right out there. And so I think we live in a world where, maybe the scientists and the engineers are decidedly moving in favor of theism. Oddly enough, the arts, like the College of Arts and Sciences, et cetera, not sciences, but the liberal arts and the humanities community is moving away from theism. And so we've got this kind of strange rift, but make no mistake about it, the scientists are going pro theism. Even though there's in the humanities, a shift toward, agnosticism and atheism, unbelief, it certainly isn't any rational argument. It's not a scientific argument. It's not a logical argument. Basically, these are emotive arguments and preferences, and they're basically coming out of social theories, and many of them are Marxist social theories or critical, theories or deconstructionist theories. And all of them, in my opinion, are the height of irrationality. So anyway, I'll just leave it at that. And so I think the rationalists are, and the rational argumentation, the scientists are making a fine showing for theism. I think those people who disengage themselves and even want to deconstruct themselves out of existence are moving. And well, if they can deconstruct themselves out of existence, why not God?
Mm-hmm. Father Spitzer, that's I didn't know that. It's a fascinating survey, the results of that, to think about the way in which scientists are moving towards the arguments that are rooted in reason, in authentic reason, seeing evidence for God or for a creator in the world around them. You think of we always hear about sort of the scholarly pressures to suppress those kinds of beliefs. But I think that one of the things that can happen is that the general populace, sort of the popular opinion is, well, the scientists have already agreed that, and they speak as if there is a consensus that is almost unquestioned, that the idea that there is a God is something that doesn't require, only requires faith, that you don't have the rational evidence for it. I think that one of the popular arguments that is often stated is the universe is so big, and as we see how large this universe is, how can the earth be special at all? And so that idea of the grandeur of the universe diminishes the specialness of the earth.
Well, the specialness of the earth doesn't come from its position. I mean, that would be silly. God, he chose, after all, little Bethlehem and little Israel and a stable. So God wasn't worried about grandeur of position. But he did create a special creature on the earth that we have not yet found in any significant way anywhere else. Now, I know there are a lot of people out there who believe in intelligent aliens. That may be true. It may not be true. I have yet to see convincing evidence. I've heard lots of rumors, lots of spacecraft that have appeared, things of this nature. I have nothing against aliens and intelligent aliens in principle, because I know if they're intelligent like us, they would have to have a soul like ours. And if they had a soul like ours, I know one thing: it didn't arise out of an evolutionary process. That soul came from a special creation of God himself, the only transcendent, transphysical cause out there that's in the creation business. And there's very good proofs of that. But the point that I'm trying to make is, even though people will say that, I think the specialness of the earth comes in the fact that right here God made, right? It's kind of in a, it's not in a central position in our galaxy. And indeed it couldn't be, because there's a black hole situated in the middle of our galaxy, which would be disastrous for us to be in. And our galaxy isn't at the center of the universe. We don't, look at a center in that way. And I just think, we got to just take ourselves away from this idea that position equals grandeur. All we got to do is look at ourselves. All we have to do is look at the fact that we have a desire for perfect truth and perfect love and perfect beauty and perfect goodness and perfect being. I mean, where did we get these desires without some tacit awareness of what perfect truth, love, goodness, beauty, and being would be like? And where did we get that from, if not God, a transphysical cause speaking within our very souls, and the souls that he created? And you look at rationality. I got a brand new book coming out in fall of next year with Ignatius Press, called Science at the Doorstep to God. And in there, I explain the uniqueness of the human soul in terms of self-consciousness as well as rationality. And yes, there are traditional arguments that establish this very nicely, but there are also contemporary ones. Robert Berwick and Noam Chomsky's recent book from MIT Press, that called Why Only Us, looking at, human syntactical the requirements of human syntax and human syntactical formulations in light of the research of Herbert Terrace, et cetera, and coming to the point, well, I don't think we can do this only with physical processes. We're going to have to find some explanation of syntactical language beyond what physical processes in their linearity and even in their hierarchical linearity can explain. And this is a problem for so many materialistic arguments. So I think there's very good reasons to believe that if you find an alien, he speaks like us, he's thinking about perfect truth, love, goodness, beauty, and being like us, he's thinking of God like us, he buries his dead with all kinds of grave artifacts that'll be useful for the next life, et cetera, or whatever, as we see in, the breakoff, 60,000 years ago from our human ancestors. We look at that and we see these things, the only thing you can possibly conclude is that Of course, we have a transphysical soul. We can't reduce our linguistic processes, our mathematical processes, our religious intuitions, our desire for perfect truth, love, goodness, beauty, and being. We cannot reduce these. Even our conscience, as Newman showed many years ago, cannot be reduced to physical processes alone. And if that's the case, then something transphysical needs to have created something transphysical in us, namely our soul. And I think that's becoming more and more apparent. What's so interesting is there's these near-death experiences and some really good peer-reviewed medical studies of them, which demonstrate this very well. And so when you take a look at the formidable evidence that we have a soul that is very likely to survive bodily death, that was created by God, I have no trouble saying, if you discover an alien and he's intelligent like us, has transcendental desires like us, has a sense of God like us, has a conscience like us, that alien was created by God because he has a transphysical soul, because his activities cannot be explained by physical processes alone. And I'll bet he has near-death experiences just like we do, and that he has discovered that consciousness will survive bodily death, just as we have in scientific and good peer-reviewed medical studies. So yeah, I mean, that's the creation we have here on this earth. And I mean, you look at that and you go, oh, that's astounding. Who cares? You know, whether we're in the center of the galaxy, as I said, we couldn't be anyway in the center of the galaxy. Black hole would eat us up in 2 seconds. But we're right in a nice position in the spiral where we've got a very comfortable spot. And that spot, of course, to me, is the beginning of civilization as I know it right now, until I see evidence proving otherwise. So, and if I do find evidence proving otherwise, no big deal. God created that alien too, and he knows it. That alien knows it.
Father Spitzer, that's awesome. I love those questions. All right, so
Yeah.
now you got beamed up into an alien spacecraft, and they said, Father Spitzer, we love what you're saying. We're going to give you 1 hour to ask us questions. What do you ask the aliens in terms of getting insight into this created world that right now we have limits in what we're able to discover or understand? Where would you take a conversation with an alien?
I would take them right to the transcendentals, as I think St. Thomas Aquinas would have done. I would just ask him, well, you know, do you think you have an unrestricted desire to know? And then, of course, if so, well, where do you think that came from? And then I would go through that series of questions.
Well, no, what I'm wondering, Father, is like, I'd ask about gravity. Like, what's gravity? Or I'd ask about the speed of light. Hey, do we understand light the right way? I mean, what about time travel? What about, what's on the other side of a black hole? Or do you have any,
Oh, yeah. I mean, all those questions are important questions. I mean, you know, it depends on whether you want to start with the physics questions or you want to start with the metaphysical questions. You know, my preference is, you know, I'd like to learn a little bit about them and the metaphysical part. But if I wanted to ask, you know, the physics questions, the first thing is I'd pull out the quantum equations and I'd pull out the relativity equations, and I would put it to them. I would say, okay, we have found that these equations are descriptive and explanatory of the universe as we know it. What have we left out from these 2 equations? That's the first question. Second, how do you put together, you know, quantum and relativity, and with, you know, narrowing the gap of uncertainty that would be there, indeterminacy that would be there, if possible, and if not, is indeterminacy a part of our universe as you understand it? That would be, of course, a secondary question. A third question, you know, I'm not a big believer in wormholes as being the salvation for, you know, travel, you know, to distant parts of the universe without having to go through space-time, because the problem is going into a wormhole and coming out of a wormhole and being in the wormhole. There's like 10,000 ways in which you could be utterly destroyed instantaneously by any law of physics we currently understand. So I'm thinking, I could ask them, well, gee, did you guys come through a wormhole? And if you did, gee whiz, how'd you prevent yourself from being utterly, obliterated? and maybe they have an answer, but maybe they'll go, you can't go through a wormhole without being obliterated. I don't know. But anyway, right now, obliteration looks like the only realistic way of dealing with wormholes. There's got to be another way if there's an accelerated speed travel of doing this rather than a wormhole. There are other theories that people have for, hyperspace and so forth and so on. But a lot of these theories, I'll be honest with you, are as fanciful as they are factually based. So, but anyway, I certainly would be interested in supersonic transport of some sort or another. It wouldn't just be supersonic, it would be speed of light transport, not just faster than the speed of sound. So all that would be very interesting to me. I would also be very interested, though, in their degree of civilization, their sense of morality, and where they think their sense of morality comes from. I drift into the metaphysical again. So, but yeah, there's all kinds of fascinating things from the physical perspective that are out there, but also from the metaphysical perspective, and getting common ground on transcendence and metaphysics. I'll tell you one thing, I don't think the aliens would be agreeing with Dawkins' earlier materialism. Of course, he shifted his position now. He says, I'm not an atheist anymore. I'm just an agnostic who leans toward atheism. Well, let's just say, I don't think the aliens would be anywhere near Dawkins. I think they would wind up looking at that view as quite silly if they have the degree of mathematical competency that and physical discovery that we think they might have in order to do the space travel that would be necessary to travel the immense distances from another planet just in another star, let alone another galaxy. It would require technology so far beyond us that I know one thing: if they had that technology, they could obliterate the Earth in a single second. The fact that they don't obliterate the Earth in a single second with that kind of technology means that they have a conscience, and they will allow a weaker civilization to live on. And I would like to talk to them about their conscience and where they think they got that from, and to have that kind of a metaphysical discussion along with the discussion of physics.
That's Father Robert Spitzer joining me today on the program. And Father, did you ever think about we were going to talk about aliens?
No, I didn't actually.
See?
I said, well, no, maybe your son asked you that. He's a crafty son. I'll say
that. Yes. Well, today, one of the reasons why Father Spitzer's on is to talk about the upcoming gala for Healing the Culture. It's happening on the 23rd and 24th of September. It's coming up at Holy Family in Kirkland on the 23rd. And you can go to healingtheculture.com and you can click right on the main page right there, the ability to sign up for and to register to attend that gala at Holy Family in Kirkland. Then the next day at Post Falls, Idaho, at the Trailhead Event Center. Again, on healingtheculture.com, you'll be able to sign up for that. And if you can't attend, if you're listening outside of those two local areas and you want to participate, you can participate virtually by getting a gala in the box. And you can do that also by clicking right on that selection on healingtheculture.com. So, Father Spitzer, okay, let's go from outer space. Let's land that spaceship and let's stay a little bit more grounded here on Earth, okay?
Sure.
Okay, next question. So we had a priest over our house for dinner the other day, and my son asked, if you could have dinner with any person alive on Earth right now, who would you have dinner with and why?
Well, let's see. From a physics point of view, I would be very interested in having dinner with Thomas Banks, a very important physicist. I think he intrigues me very much, and his positions on things, both physical and even to some extent metaphysical. But he's a very fine physicist. He'd be an intriguing fellow. I think, of course, I would love to have a dinner with Francis Collins, the head of the Genome Project, very much a theist of the first water. And he's a very fascinating person as well. Comes at things from a biological point of view, and I think that would be very fascinating. I think also I'd, if it were from a more, spiritual point of view, I'd like to have dinner with Pope Benedict. I mean, when I was a younger man, I used to be so intimidated. I'd go over and visit my friend Gottfried Kuster over at the Germanicum, and at the Teutonicum. And, there would sit Cardinal Ratzinger at the table, and I would look and I go, oh my gosh, if I have to sit down at that table, he's going to ask me 3 questions and I'll be proved a heretic twice during lunch, and I thought, oh, I better, but of course he was always the most gracious and wonderful person. But, being a sort of an elementary theologian, I was a nervous wreck. But, today I would, with all of his vast experience and seeing everything that he has seen, I'd love to have a conversation with him, just not just about world events, but spiritual life in general. I think he would be a very, very fine influence, and and not just from the fame and fortune point, and well, no fortune, but from the fame point of view, but really, I think the spiritual depth point of view. I think, oh gosh, there's some really wonderful philosophers and metaphysicians out there who are also tremendous people. But those are some of the ones that I'd like to have dinner with. I'm not very, politicians don't do it for me. And I'm not that interested in a lot of the current politicians. But, if I would, I'd probably pick a couple of politicians that I think, have a very good pro-life position that would intrigue me. But that's where I'd probably, maybe I'd have a luncheon list,
That's
bring
awesome.
together, a physicist, a biologist, a pope, and maybe one politician, maybe somebody with a military experience, like a Pompeo or something. But anyway, Pompeo, but something like that. So anyway, those are my.
Well, Father Spitzer, you've kind of revealed here that there was someone that intimidated you a little bit when you sat down with him.
Oh yeah,
Cardinal Ratzinger. I like that. That's
oh
good.
yeah. Oh, he doesn't know how much he intimidated. But Godfrey Kuster would tell me, come on, what's the matter with you? I said, oh, that's Cardinal Ratzinger. He's one of the brightest minds in the Catholic Church today. I'm just trying to prevent being called a heretic. He said, oh, stop it. So of course I would go over there, and he spoke English so well I didn't have to worry about speaking perfect German. So everything was great. He's just a lovely, good, deep, wonderful, spiritual, brilliant man.
Well, today I'm talking with Father Robert Spitzer, and if you want to gain more insight and wisdom from Father Spitzer, he is a prolific author, including a set of 4 books that he wrote on Finding True Happiness, The Soul's Upward Yearning, God So Loved the World, and The Light Shines On in the Darkness, as well as 2 amazing books called Escape from Evil's Darkness and Christ versus Satan in Our Daily Lives. Father Spitzer, I've appreciated your books so much through the years. I want to ask you to speak into a couple of things that I think are pressing issues for a lot of Catholics today. So
Sure.
First, let's stay in the church, and then we'll move as the church faces the world. So in the church itself, there is a fellow Jesuit that you didn't mention potentially having lunch with or dinner with. That would be Pope Francis. Now, Pope Francis
Yeah, I wouldn't avoid Pope Francis. I mean,
Okay.
I've actually tried to meet him once, but because of COVID, that just fell apart. But no, I wouldn't avoid having lunch with Pope Francis. I think, I'm the reason I tend toward Benedict is because he is a theologian and a theoretical kind of a person. Pope Francis is, a more practical kind of person, and more, what I would call politically oriented kind of a person, in his, viewpoints. But no, I have a lot of things I would discuss with him too.
Well, and Father Spitzer, here's what I want to ask you about that. So,
Yeah.
So I see online and interact with so many Catholics that would self-identify as Orthodox, right? So they believe the fullness of the Catholic faith, they promote it, defend it, seek to understand it. And yet there's a point at which they often get divided into these camps where there's almost no bridge between them. And that is the person and teaching and approach of Pope Francis. And so you have folks that are, again, very traditional Orthodox in the living of their Catholic faith, and yet they have this sense of the Pope is taking us in a bad direction, is doing wrong things, etc. And then you have this other group who are saying, whoa, wait a minute. That's the successor of St. Peter. That's the vicar of Christ on earth. Don't go there. You are departing from what you say is your actual true faith in living out the fullness of your faith. And good luck trying to get these folks to find some kind of common ground online. So, Father, I'm bringing you a really difficult question.
Oh no, I'm in the second group, unquestionably. I definitely think that Pope Francis is the vicar of Christ. He's the duly appointed person, and that duly appointed, mechanism. The Holy Spirit is speaking through it. We've been guaranteed that. Satan is not going to be victorious against the church. And so I think we have to follow him. But in all areas of prudential judgments, right? And which is different from doctrine and ordinary magisterium and extraordinary magisterium. Prudential judgments, right, concern, when we're talking about, for example, the implementation of social doctrines. And so the seven principles of the church is social teaching, those seven principles. There are a lot of areas in which the church herself says, yeah, these are prudential judgments. These are not ordinary or extraordinary magisterium. You have the right to dissent. So if in a papal encyclical, you say, well, you ought to have, your air conditioner on at a certain amount, or you ought to have a carbon footprint of this amount. You can dissent from that. That's not a matter of ordinary magisterium or extraordinary magisterium. And the criteria for that are all set out very definitely. And, do I agree with everything that I read in a social encyclical? No, I don't, because so much of it is implementation. And I respectfully disagree with that, and that we are entitled to do. But I don't think it's necessary to vilify the person who extended the opinion that I disagree with. And I think he is the vicar of Christ. He is due respect. And so I very much think that, yes, I give him the respect that is due. I think the Holy Spirit obviously is speaking through him. I cannot believe that the Spirit is not speaking through him. But remember, when you talk about ordinary and extraordinary magisterium, right, that's one thing where the Spirit is speaking. But if you're talking about, prudential judgments, there's no guarantee that the Spirit is speaking in that. That's his best prudential. That means coming from himself or the scientific experts he's or other experts that he's using. That's their best human judgment. And I can dissent from that, and I have definitely dissented from that because I think, in some cases, I have other views of economics and science, other, access to studies that maybe, which I respectfully disagree with Pope Francis in certain judgments. But you cannot vilify the, the pontiff. You can't vilify the vicar of Christ duly appointed by the Spirit working through the church. I find that to be profoundly, un-Catholic.
Mhm. That's a great answer, Father Spitzer. So,
Yeah.
Father Spitzer, we're going to go from let's say intramuros in the walls within the church issue
Mhm.
to now the church facing the world.
Yeah.
I think one of the most pressing issues comes back to something that Healing the Culture presents so profoundly and beautifully, which is
Mhm.
authentic human nature.
Uh-huh.
And you probably know where I'm headed, which is the denial of a human nature that is gendered. And so the
Mhm.
very profound and important truth that God made us male and female is
Mhm.
under attack in like a tidal wave and an onslaught of pressure and policies and now laws and from the medical community. What would you say to parents, to Catholics that are listening here about the way in which we are to stand up with the fullness of the truth entrusted to us about human nature?
Well, there are three approaches that you can take. One is a biological approach. The second is a theological approach. And the third is what I would call an emotional health or psychological approach. And, to each to the questions you raised. So first of all, let's just take the biological approach. There is no genetic basis, none, no brain physiological basis to establish transgenderism as being part of human nature. So the idea of a man being trapped in a woman's body or a woman being trapped in a man's body, there is no biological basis or genetic basis for this. It simply is erroneous to assert anything else. At best, then, it is a psychological wish. It is not an intrinsic desire or an intrinsic or urgent motivating force from within, as if it were biologically stimulated. So that's the first thing. So there is no physiological basis for transgenderism. There's some very good articles on this. You might want to take a look at an article by Richard Fitzgibbons, Dr. Richard Fitzgibbons, and two other authors. It was written in the National Catholic Bioethics Quarterly about, I'd say it's about 10 years old now anyway, but it's on sexual reassignment surgery. It's a very long article. I think it's about 60 pages or something, but well worth the read because it breaks down a lot of these different, supposed biological bases. There's another one by Lawrence Mayer and Paul McHugh, two professors at Johns Hopkins University. They wrote a study, I guess it was maybe about 6-7 years ago anyway. And it was, again, looking at the biological basis for transgenderism and pretty much saying this, there's no way there's a biological basis for this. So let's just take that off the proverbial academic stage. The second thing is the theological basis for this. I don't have to, he made them male and female. He created them. Now, however you want to interpret that, I think that's a very profound statement, not just biologically, but theologically. And I think, there's a, adequate justification for that in not an encyclical, in a teaching, a letter that was put forward by, I believe it was the Vatican Commission on Education. It was about, again, about 10 years ago. He made the male and female as the name of the letter. and you can just put Vatican, he made them male and female, and you can see the theological justification. And the position of our church is very clear on this. So I don't think I have to go into the theological. The emotional health dimension of it, gets us to the real causes. What's the real cause of transgenderism? And I think the real causes are several. And they can be and are frequently a blend of four major causes. First, in between 40 to 60%, depending on the study you're using, 40 to 60% of the children, this is the pre-adolescents, who have a cross gender confusion or have a desire to become the other sex, 40 to 60% have been physically or sexually abused as children. So that is a huge factor. And just keep this in mind. There's got to be anxieties that are associated with physical and sexual abuse. But oftentimes this is combined with a second major cause, namely significant anxiety in the household. So in the case of boys who want to become girls, that we see the anxiety level is on the mom, in the mother on the household. And the boy says, well, this is my fault that my mother is so anxious and my mother is so unhappy. And she is unhappy, right? We're talking about a 4 or 5-year-old here, right? She's unhappy because I'm the wrong sex. She wishes she had a girl, and she really, it's the boy in me that she's upset about. If I just get this fixed, I'll make my mother happy and I will be happier. So, and it's the reverse with the girl, the anxiety on the part of the father. If I just he hates me being a female, rather have a boy, etc. So that is oftentimes a secondary anxiety that's mixed in with oftentimes physical and sexual abuse. You put those two together and the storm is already brewing. A third major cause, at least probably at least 50% of the cases, is latent homosexual desires becoming more and more explicitly manifest. And so inability to handle that and thinking if I just become the other sex, that fixes it. I'm not, going to be looking for the same sex. I'm looking for another, the regular, I'll be quote unquote heterosexual once again. Again, we're looking at a kid's interpretation, which of course is undeveloped intellectually and emotionally. So that's a third major thing. And then oftentimes, you do have parents who really do explicitly say, I would have rather had a boy or a girl, and the poor little kid has to live up to, the expectation, or the mother that dresses the little boy up in girls' clothes, et cetera, and expresses, even a female name for the little boy. Well, you put together all the anxieties that are associated with these behaviors to the little kid, right? Or in the case is, the homosexual desires that might be there. You put them all together and you've got a massive ball of anxiety that is going on. Now, what a therapist would tell you right away is the way to treat that is not to give the child what the child believes is the solution to this huge anxiety bomb that they are feeling interiorly. In other words, if I just get a sex change, it'll all be fixed. The way out of it, right, is going to happen by getting therapy to help the child see the solution is not changing your sex, right? Because if you can show them that the anxiety can be solved without having a sex change, they just go back to their biological sex. And by the way, about 81% with no therapy or minimal therapy will just go back to their biological sex. If you don't pressure them into getting a sex change, or keep telling them that the solution is a sex change when they're pre-adolescents, right? Because if they move into their adolescence believing that the sex change is the answer, the odds of you dissuading them at that juncture are very difficult. But if you can handle this and get the therapy there before adolescence, you can have successful, oftentimes very successful alleviation of cross-gender confusion, as well as a solution to the anxiety problem. Now, here's the problem of the sex change. Let's suppose, and this is why I think it's medically unethical. The reason is because let's suppose the child says, I want the sex change, the parent accommodates, everybody's accommodating, pushing them along. Well, will they feel relief after the sex change? Yes, they will. They're going to feel a great relief of the anxiety for 3 to 5 years after the surgery. But about 5 years after the surgery, the anxieties will re-emerge, almost like a cancer that re-emerges for the second time with a, kind of a great viciousness, right? It comes right out and it starts really manifesting itself powerfully. And of course, then that means that the sex change was not the solution to the anxiety. All of a sudden, the anxiety reappears with the sex change, which causes buyer's remorse. In other words, the person now, this is the post-adolescent, now says, oh, wait a minute, gosh, this, I still feel all these terrible anxieties. I've permanently, maimed myself. There's no turning back. And now the buyer's remorse starts. And at this juncture, what you find is that the rate of depression and anxiety just accelerates tremendously. 20 years after the surgery 10 years after the surgery has been completed, you can expect to find between a 19 times to 20 times increase in the suicide rate from the general population. 19 times, that's 1,900% or 2,000% increase in suicides for those who have had the sexual reassignment surgery. Do you think that's ethical? I don't think that's ethical. I think that's medically very unethical. And I think, honestly, we need to reflect not only as a medical and academic community, we need to reflect as a nation, look straight on at the consequences of what is going on here. All the anxieties that we are leaving untreated by giving a false solution, which may make some doctors a whole lot of money and may make some post-adolescents and parents happy for 5 years. I'm telling you, there is a strong increase that they will not be happy after 5 years after the surgery. And so, again, I caution people that this is a false solution and that much of what is going on here is not psychologically or medically warranted, that in fact, this is politically motivated, and it's motivated, in my view, toward a subjectivist view of human identity, which brings me into a whole other question, which I won't get into right now. But no, I don't think it's a good idea. Spiritually, it's a lousy idea. Emotionally, it's a lousy idea. And there's no biological basis for it whatsoever. So I'm against it. I challenge it ethically. And I think it should be absolutely, looked at soberly, scientifically, psychologically. We need to depoliticize this issue, get rid of that subjectivist identity issue, and come back to looking at some facts and what's really good for our young people and what's really good for our culture and nation.
That's Father Robert Spitzer. Father Spitzer, it's difficult to overstate the value of what you're talking about here today, and the desperate need we have for voices like yours to be able to help bring clarity into places of confusion, especially where there's so much harm at stake. Folks, we're close to the end of our time with Father Spitzer, so I'm going to encourage you to go to magiscenter.com, M-A-G-I-S magiscenter.com, where you can get articles and books and blogs and so much else that Father Spitzer and his team have done on science, reason, and faith, Jesus in the church, happiness and suffering, and spiritual and moral growth. But if you want to have a chance to interact with Father Spitzer, enjoy him in person, I'm going to encourage you to sign up for the Healing the Culture Gala coming up on September the 23rd and the 24th. So that's just a short time from now. On the 23rd, happening at Holy Family in Kirkland. Wonderful opportunity to meet Father Spitzer there, along with Camille Pauly and other wonderful folks from the Healing the Culture team. And then on the 24th, I'll be there on the 24th, Father Spitzer. I have the privilege of being the MC for that event. So get ready. More difficult questions, Father Spitzer, coming your way.
Bring your son.
I know. I should bring my whole family, my kiddos. They took tickets at the last gala, so we'll get them involved somehow. And that's at the Trailhead Event Center. And again, you can find out about how to sign up for and register for those at healingtheculture.com, healingtheculture.com, and just click on right on the homepage there. You'll see the Gala 2022. Father Spitzer, we are out of time, but not out of insight. Father, I always appreciate the wisdom that you bring. You're the easiest interview I have. You're the most intimidating, but you're the easiest. I just I throw a question out there and just sit back and just drink it all in. So Father Spitzer, it was awesome. I really appreciate the time you've given me today.
Oh, thanks so much, Dr. Curran, and just always a pleasure to be with you.